Welcome back to Epilogues, an unpacking of the weekly Haftarah. You are listening to Rabbi Yaakov Trump. This week we're going to be addressing the Haftarah of Parshas Vayishlach. This is the Haftarah which contains, the only Haftarah to contain an entire book of Nach, perhaps with the exception of the afternoon of Yom Kippur's Haftarah, where it includes the book of Yonah. The book that we're going to be studying today is the book of Ovadia. It is a one-chapter sefer in Nach. It is found in the Trei Asar in what's called the 12 minor prophets. Minor not because of their level of prophecy, but minor in the sense that their books are shorter. Ovadia is 21 psukim in length, and that's the Haftarah that we're dealing with, and it's broken down into three basic sections. The first 9 psukim just talking about the destruction of Edom. The next psukim from Yud to Yudalad talking about the rebuke of mishandling Israel. And finally, Tesvav to Chaf Aleph, 15 to 21, is about the salvation of Israel. A few basic questions. Number one is, who is Ovadia? So Ovadia actually is mentioned a number of times in Tanakh. There are 2 Ovadias that appeared actually in the same era. So we know from Divrei Yomim Beis, Perek Yud Zayin, Pasuk Zayin, that there was a Ovadia who was a official of King Yehoshaphat in the kingdom of Judea. Whereas in Melachim Aleph, Perek Yud Ches, Pasuk Gimel, we hear about a Ovadia who is a Yirei Shemaim, a fearer of heaven, who looked Yorei Estevar Es Hashem Me'od, he feared heaven greatly, and we're told that he in fact saved the prophets during the terrible era of decree where Jezebel was the queen, and she had a campaign against the prophets of God, was eradicating them, and he saved 100 of them and sustained them on his own credit, thereby actually impoverishing himself in his future as a result of this. So, and they lived at the same time, one in the north and one in the south. So these are possibilities of actually the name that is mentioned elsewhere in Tanakh. The primary focus of this Haftarah, interestingly enough, is Edom. Who is Edom? Well, in the Torah, and this is why it is connected to Parshas Vayishlach predominantly, which is a showdown between Yaakov and Esav, Edom refers to Esav. Esav is the brother of Yaakov, and Yaakov negotiated with him, tricked him, ran from him, appeased him, and blessed him. We have the entire story moving from Toldos to Vayetze to Vayishlach. This climax now leads to this focus on Edom as well. It seems to be a seesaw effect, as that there seems to be one in power when the other one is not in power, as Rivka was prophesied to at the beginning when she had that conflict in her womb. She was told, that there's going to be one will be mightier than the other, and that's going to be always at inversely proportional times. As a nation, who is Edom as a nation? Well, that's a little more complex. The area that Edom occupies, which was the area of Seir, which Esau conquered, is towards the south area of the country Jordan today. So that's the southeast area of where across the Jordan where Israel is today, below the Dead Sea, and that's sort of the area where Petra, if people are going sightseeing, that area is where Edom was. It is interesting that there are many prophecies about Israel taking back his land at the end of days. Har Esav refers to the mountains of Esav in that area where they used to be predominant. It is interesting that during the times of Yehoshaphat and Achav, when these 2 Ovadias were in power, when these 2 Ovadias lived, at least that we see in Tanakh, it was a period in which it was the end of the colonization of that area. When David HaMelech conquered the area surrounding Israel, Edom was one of the nations that was subsidiary to the nation of Israel, paid taxes, was not allowed their own king, and it was during this period of time of Achav and Yehoshaphat that subservience was being questioned and their independence was being formed. So there's certainly an element which is related as well to that as well. However, it seems that Edom takes on a bigger role. Edom seems to symbolize evil in nations, perhaps because of his closeness. In fact, so the Sifrei famously says that Edom, in fact, equals Rome. And this is the final battle between the expression of the ideology of Yaakov and Esav, which is in our parsha, is expressed here as well. Which leads us to the question is, why would Ovadia, this prophet, give a prophecy about this bigger picture when that wasn't really what he was living? Edom wasn't the main issue of the time. It wasn't. Yes, there was certainly, we'll call it tension in the colonies, but it wasn't it wasn't seen as the main issue, the existential issue of the days. The Gemara asks this question in Sanhedrin Daf Lametesam Beis, and the Gemara says Chazon Avadia. It says Ma'ishna Avadia leEdom. Why is he talking about Edom? So the Gemara presents a couple of options where Rabbi Yitzchak says Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yavo Avadia Hadar Ben Shnei Rishayim V'lo Lamad Mimaseim V'Nove Al Esav Rosh Shadar Ben Shnei Tzadikim V'lo Lamad Mimaseim. So that the idea is that Avadia lived at a very difficult time. He had very bad neighbors. That's Achav and Izevel. And nonetheless, he did what was right. He saved the prophets. So this is a kitruk. It is really a claim on Esav, who lived between two tzaddikim, and nevertheless never learned from their actions. There's another possibility raised in the Gemara. That's Ephraim Maksha'ah, where the Talmud of Rabbi Meir said, in the name of Rabbi Meir, that Avadia ger Adomi Haya. In fact, he came from the nation of Edom. And the Gemara then quotes an idiom which has been made famous by a Matizyahu song, which is that the Amri Inshi people say Mineu Bei Ava Nezil Bei Narga, that within the forest itself comes the handle of the axe. So it's meaning to say he is going to be the tool of destruction of the Edomites as a function of the fact that he came from them as well. It is worthwhile noting that in the Toldos Israel, Dr. Zev Yavetz and many academics suggest that perhaps the Avadia we're talking about is not the Avadia mentioned in Tanakh. Could have been an Avadia at the times of Yirmiyah, which relates much more to the times of destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, which is perhaps more thematic to what he's talking about. Let's take a look very briefly inside. So we hear at the beginning it's called a Chazon Avadia. This is called prophecy. Chazon is one of the words that relates to sight. This is the vision of Avadia, and he says, I've heard this saying, Shmo Shemanu. What's the saying? Tzir Bagoyim Sholach. Tzir is sometimes translated as an ambassador. An ambassador was sent to among the other nations. And what is the message? Hine koton asaticha bagoyim bozuyat ha'ma'od. I've made you small among the nations. You've been very disgraced, and you're going to be misled by the aspirations of your heart, because you should know, even if you go high like the eagle, and if you're going to make your nesting place among the stars, don't just realize I'm going to bring you down. There's going to be a time limit for your success as well. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu describes that on those days, that no matter how arrogant you're going to be, I'm going to destroy you. I'm going to destroy your wisdom, your wise people. I'm going to stop the terrible things that you're doing in the world. So just a few basic questions. What is this tzir that is sent to the nations? What's this ambassador to the nations? Abarbanel explains. Abarbanel sees this very much as a description of Europe during the time that he lives, which is around the end of the 1400s, beginning of the 1500s. He says that Christianity will conquer Jerusalem as one of its holy sites, and it will take it from Egypt, and in doing so will kill many Muslims, and the many Muslim countries will converge around Jerusalem in retaliation. So we're talking about a war between East and West, between two different monotheistic religions. And this is very much contemporary to what the Abarbanel was witnessing, because if you remember, the Abarbanel lived through the Spanish expulsion of the Jews, and it's a worthwhile understanding that Spanish expulsion of Jews did not come in a vacuum. It was the culmination of a war effort against the Moors, as the Catholic, or that there was only Catholicism at the time, as Christianity was clearing the Iberian Peninsula of the Moors, and fueling the war effort was a lot of the Jewish money, which was part of the reason for the expulsion, was to be able to capitalize on the rest of that, and to clean the Iberian Peninsula of both the non-believers, whether they be Muslim or Jews. And there was a belief that at the turn of the century, in the 1500s, the Christians would once again send another crusade under Isabella and Ferdinand to the Holy Land to reclaim Jerusalem. And this was really the talk of the time, this pre-messianic feeling within Christianity. The return of their Savior this was predominantly talked about at that time, and the Abarbanel understands that this is what's being referred to in the Haftorah as well. It could also be, around this idea seems to replay itself around World War I, when the East and the West are fighting over the holy places in the Middle East, and there's the slow reclaiming from the colonization of the West from the powers of Islam. It's worthwhile noting that if you read about the first Crusades, and we talk about that the Crusaders first arrived at Jerusalem, and it was Jew and Muslim fighting side by side against the Crusaders, and they were killed side by side in Jerusalem. It's very interesting to look at this history. Now, what does it mean that they are small? This nation is small. The Gemara of Daf Yud Amud Aleph tells us that the Romans didn't create their own culture. They just essentially reused the culture around them as well. Rashi describes that it could mean once they're vanquished as well. It's worthwhile thinking about that Gemara in Avodah Zarah. The Dr. Shneir Laman has a very beautiful shir on this, where the topic of how Christian culture or the Roman culture itself was exporting an element of Judaism itself within a corrupted fashion, and why that was. Very fascinating topic in and of itself. The Rabbanan points out that they are a small country, but the people who came from it came to Italy, and they dominated the whole world. So it started really from original Edomites, and those are the people who laid seed for Italy turning and Greece into the dominions that they were as well. It seems like in this first section that although there was a first round of battle, Edom was not wiped out fully. Whether it's the land of Edom, whether it's this nation of Edom or Rome, it was attacked and burned numerous times, but it was never really vanquished, as we see what happened with Rome itself. And in the day, they will only be fully cut down in the future. The second section is about the mishandling of Israel. We hear about how the mechamas achicha Yaakov techascha busha v'nichrata leolam, because you did not take note, you were not there. You hid yourself from the anger of your brother, or what was going on with your brother. That's going to be held against you. You saw them coming to Jerusalem, and you did nothing. You didn't do anything as well. It's a lot of criticism on that front as well. So therefore, you're not going to be able to return because of this betrayal. You seem to be a brother, and because you're a brother, you have the responsibility of acting like a brother, and yet you didn't. When did this actually occur? So Ibn Ezra says it was around the destruction of the first Beis Hamikdash, when the Edomites did not come to join the alliance with Israel, with Judea. The Radak says it's later on. It's referring to when the Romans conquered Israel at the times of Bayis Sheni. The Abarbanel says it may be both, since because the elements of them in both of these times, and they're seen as, whether they're the perpetrator or they're bystander, they are considered more responsible, culpable, because of their relationship to us as well. It's worthwhile reading the annals of the destruction of the second Beis Hamikdash, as is described in Josephus, and understanding there was this interesting episode that happened with the Edomians, who on the one hand were an ally of Israel, but ended up conquering the city just before the Romans came, and killing the last Kohen Gadol, in a sense to protect the city, but ultimately led to the full anarchy of the city under the Zealots, which led to the fall before the Romans. Worthwhile thinking about that as another place as well. And finally, in the section 3, we hear about the final battle. We hear about Ki Karov Yom Hashem al HaKol HaGoyim. There's going to be a day of battle against all the nations, and it's going to sound like it's going to surround Har Tzion, the Mount Zion, which is the mountain adjacent to Har HaMoriah. It's often used as a metaphor for the Beis Hamikdash, but it's actually the adjacent mountaintop. It's the mountaintop where most of the Jewish quarter is actually where Har Tzion is today. And Uvar Tzion Yitia Pleita Vaya Kodesh. There's going to be a refuge over there. Vaya Beis Yaakov Eish, Ubeis Yosef Lehava, Ubeis Esav Lakash. It's going to be the house of Jacob is fire, the house of Joseph is the spark, and the house of Esav is the straw. And it's going to be that Yosef is going to be the spark which leads from the fire to the straw, and that'll catalyze everything that will go on there afterwards. Rashi quotes us famously that this is the reason why Yaakov Avinu felt comfortable going back to his land when Yosef was born, because he knew that Yosef was this protection agency, or this aggression agency as well. And finally, Kodesh Baruch Hu describes the Galus Echel Hazeh, and this exile which began Livnei Yisrael Asher Kananim Ad Tzarfas Galus Yerushalayim Asher B'Sfarad Yerushu Es Arei HaNegev. They'll all come back to Israel from all the places they were. And finally and famously, the pasuk is V'alu Mosheim Har Tzion Lishpot Es Eresav V'Yisrael Hashem HaMelucha. The Mosheim, those saviors, will come to Har Tzion to judge the mountain of Esav, and it'll be dominion to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. When is this final battle taking place? So Ibn Ezra says it could be when Nebuchadnezzar battles Edom after the fall of Judea and exiles them, and they never really return, as described in Malachi. The Radak says it could be later on in the second Beis Hamikdash, in the times of Hyrcanus, when he reprised the Romans. Baranel says these are too short-sighted. It's referring to the final battle against Christianity in the future, with Judaism and Christianity itself. Now, what does it mean that Yosef will be the spark? Baranel says there'll be an element of kibbutz galiot. There'll be this idea of all the different exilees coming in to Israel and coming together. This is seen generally mystically as the idea of Mashiach ben Yosef, the precursor to the Mashiach ben David. Rav Kook actually very strongly noted that it could be that Theodor Herzl was an element of the Mashiach ben Yosef, an idea of the person who brought back so many Jews to the land of Israel, even without, we'll call it the spiritual spark, but by the material spark, which is the precursor. That's going to be the first stage of the Geula as well. What does it mean? What's this business with all these galuyos? Abarbanel says, if you read the pasuk, it really is actually literal. It's referring to, if you look at the names, Tsarfas and Sfarad refers to Spain and France. He says these refer to the actual places that the Jews would be in all the nations of the world, and they will now come back against all their persecutions, the Otodufes, the inquisitions, all the terrible expulsions, the terrible things that Jews have been through in every exile. They'll finally be recompensed. And finally, Har Zion is going to refer to when the nation of Israel will come back to Har Zion and take it back again from the dominion of the world. The Abaranel thinks, of course, this refers to Rome, but it could mean perhaps metaphorically to more. And this comes back to our parsha, because in the end, Esav makes the proposition after he makes peace with Yaakov. He says, let's go together. And Yaakov refers, no, we can't do this. Yodea, Adoni Yodea, my master knows, the children are soft, the children are weak. And Rashi explains that he's not referring to at the time now. He's referring to in the future. He says there's going to come a time where you're going to want to make an alliance. You're going to want to be the same. You're going to want to converge cultures. And Yaakov Avinu says it doesn't work because of our education, because of our future. That battle will have to still be fought. We still need our separateness. And this is part of what the ancient prophecy of Avadia, which still resonates in today's day and age. Have a wonderful, meaningful day and beautiful Shabbos.